On my son's wedding day, my daughter-in-law raised a toast. Auction to take my sick mother-in-law away. My son said, "I'll give $8. Everyone laughed at me. But when the Arab sheikh said, "I'll give $3 million, my daughter-in-law fainted. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting the navy blue dress I had bought specifically for Dean's wedding. At 62, I wasn't the young woman I once was, but I still wanted to look my best for my son's special day. The dress had cost me more than I usually spent on myself, but this was important. This was my only child getting married. 3 years had passed since Harold died, and Dean was all I had left. The house felt so empty without Harold's laughter filling the rooms, without his gentle snoring beside me at night. Dean had been my anchor through the grief, or at least I thought he had been. Looking back now, I realize I was just convenient for him when he needed something. I applied my lipstick carefully, the same shade of rose I'd worn to my own wedding 35 years ago. My hands trembled slightly, not from age but from excitement. Finally, Dean would have a family of his own, and maybe, just maybe, I'd get the daughter I'd always wanted in Fallon. I should have known better. The drive to the venue took 40 minutes, and I spent every one of them thinking about how proud Harold would have been. Dean looked so handsome in his black tuxedo, just like his father on our wedding day. But where Harold had looked at me with pure love during our ceremony, Dean barely glanced my way when I arrived. "Mom, you made it," he said, giving me a quick, obligatory hug. His voice held no warmth, just the tone you'd use with a distant relative you felt obligated to acknowledge. "Of course I made it, sweetheart. I wouldn't miss this for the world." But Dean had already turned away, his attention caught by someone else. I stood there for a moment, feeling invisible, before making my way to find my seat. That's when I noticed the arrangement. The immediate family was seated at the front table: Dean, Fallon, her parents, her siblings. I was placed at a table in the back, with people I didn't even recognize. "Excuse me," I said to the wedding planner, a young woman with a bright smile and a clipboard. "I think there's been a mistake with my seating." She checked her list twice. "You're Mabel Thornton, mother of the groom?" "Yes, that's right." "Then you're at table 12, just as requested." "As requested. By whom?" I didn't ask because I already knew. Fallon had orchestrated this and Dean had allowed it. My chest tightened, but I forced a smile and made my way to the back of the room. The ceremony was beautiful. I'll give Fallon that. White roses everywhere, soft lighting, a string quartet playing gentle melodies. But I watched my son pledge his life to this woman, and all I could think about was how she'd already started poisoning him against me. During the kiss, when everyone was clapping and cheering, I caught Fallon's eye. She looked right at me and smirked. That's when I knew this wasn't going to end well. The reception started normally enough. People mingled, the champagne flowed, and everyone seemed to be having a wonderful time. I sat at my table with strangers, making small talk about the weather and the beautiful flowers. One elderly gentleman, impeccably dressed with kind eyes, sat quietly beside me. He'd introduced himself as Karim, but seemed content to observe rather than participate in the chatter. "You seem a bit out of place too," I whispered to him during a lull in conversation. He smiled softly. "Sometimes the most important moments happen on the sidelines." I didn't understand what he meant then. I do now. The trouble started during the toasts. Fallon's father spoke first, welcoming Dean into their family with genuine warmth. Then it was Dean's turn to speak about his new wife. He gushed about her beauty, her intelligence, how lucky he felt to have found her. Not once did he mention me, or thank me for raising him alone after his father died when he was 16. Then Fallon stood up, champagne glass in hand, her smile too bright, too sharp. "I have a special toast I'd like to make," she announced, her voice carrying across the room. "But first, I need everyone's attention for something fun." The room quieted, all eyes on her. I felt a chill run down my spine. As many of you know, Dean's mother Mabel has been feeling a bit under the weather lately. She paused, letting her words sink in. She's been such a burden. Such a concern for poor Dean. So I thought, why not have a little auction? Who wants to take home a sick mother-in-law? The room erupted in uncomfortable laughter. Some people looked shocked, others amused. I felt my face burning with humiliation, my hands gripping my napkins so tightly my knuckles went white. "Come on, Dean," Fallon continued, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "What would you bid for your dear mother?" I looked at my son, my only child, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for after his father died. I waited for him to defend me, to put a stop to this cruel joke. Instead, Dean stood up, raised his glass, and with a grin that broke my heart, said, "I'll bid $8. The laughter got louder. $8 for the woman who'd worked 2 jobs to put him through college, who'd sold her wedding ring to pay for his car, who'd given up her own dreams to make sure he had everything he needed. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like lead. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. All I could do was sit there and endure the cruelest moment of my life, surrounded by people who thought my pain was entertainment. That's when the man beside me stood up, his voice cutting through the laughter like a knife. $3 million. The words hung in the air like thunder after lightning. The entire room fell silent. Fallon's champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor. Dean's mouth dropped open, his face going pale as he stared at the man who had just spoken. Karim stood beside me, his posture straight and dignified, his dark eyes fixed on Fallon with something that looked like contempt. In that moment, he didn't look like just another wedding guest. He looked powerful, commanding, like someone who was used to being obeyed. "I said $3 million, he repeated calmly, his slight accent giving his words an exotic authority. "For the privilege of caring for this remarkable woman." I stared up at him, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. This was the quiet man who had sat beside me all evening, making gentle conversation about the flowers and the music. But now, looking at him in the soft light of the chandeliers, something stirred in my memory, something from long ago. "Karim?" I whispered, and he turned to look at me with those same dark eyes that had haunted my dreams for 40 years. "Hello, Mabel," he said softly, and suddenly I was 22 again, standing in the hospital corridor where we first met. I was a young nurse then, fresh out of training, working the night shift at Denver General. Harold and I had been engaged for 6 months, the wedding planned for the following spring. Everything in my life was mapped out, safe, predictable. Then Karim walked into the cardiac unit where I worked, and everything changed. He was a medical resident, brilliant and intense, with dreams of becoming a heart surgeon. He'd come to America from Saudi Arabia on a scholarship, determined to take everything he learned back home to help his people. We weren't supposed to notice each other. I was engaged to Harold, a good man from a good family. Karim was foreign, temporary, different from everything my parents had planned for me, but from the first night we worked together, something electric passed between us. He would find excuses to come to my station, asking questions about patients we both knew he could handle himself. I would linger at the nurse's desk when I knew he'd be making his rounds. We talked about medicine, about life, about dreams we'd never shared with anyone else. "You have such gentle hands," he told me one night as we worked together to stabilize a patient, "but strong too. You could do anything, be anything you wanted." Harold never talked to me like that. Harold saw me as his future wife, the mother of his children, the keeper of his home. Karim saw me as Mabel, just Mabel, with possibilities I'd never even considered. The night I knew I was falling in love with him, we were working late again. A patient had coded, and after we'd stabilized him, we found ourselves alone in the break room. Karim was exhausted, his usually perfect posture slumped with fatigue. "I shouldn't be here," he said suddenly, not looking at me. "You're exactly where you're supposed to be," I replied, though I wasn't sure if I was talking about the hospital or something else entirely. "No, Mabel. I shouldn't be falling in love with a woman who belongs to someone else." My heart stopped. "Karim, I know it's wrong. I know you're engaged, but I can't stop thinking about you, dreaming about you. When I finish my residency, I'm supposed to go back to Saudi Arabia, take over my family's medical practice, but all I want is to stay here with you." I should have walked away then. I should have reminded him about Harold, about my engagement, about all the reasons we couldn't be together. Instead, I stepped closer to him. "I think about you too," I whispered. That was the beginning of 6 months of secret meetings, stolen kisses, and a love that burned brighter than anything I'd ever felt. Karim would bring me books of poetry, small gifts he'd picked up at the international market. He told me about his home, about the olive trees outside his bedroom window, about the night sky over the desert that was so clear you could see forever. "Come with me," he said one evening as we sat in his small apartment near the hospital. "When my residency is over, come with me. We'll build a life together, help people together. I can show you the world, Mabel." I wanted to say yes so badly it physically hurt. But I was 22, engaged to a man my parents approved of, terrified of disappointing everyone I'd ever known. "I can't," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "You know I can't." "Why? Because of what people will think? Because it's not what your parents planned? Because I'm scared," I admitted. "What if we get there and you realize I'm not enough? What if your family doesn't accept me? What if I give up everything and lose you, too?" Karim took my hands in his, those surgeon's hands that were so gentle and sure. "You will never lose me, Mabel. Never. But I can't force you to choose a life you're not ready for." The night before Harold and I were supposed to finalize our wedding plans, Karim came to me one last time. "I'm leaving tomorrow," he said. "My residency is finished, and my family expects me back home. This is your last chance, Mabel. Come with me." I stood in that hospital corridor, torn between two futures. Harold represented safety, approval, the life everyone expected me to live. Karim represented adventure, passion, a love that scared me with its intensity. I chose safety. I chose Harold. Karim left the next morning without another word. I married Harold 6 months later, and I told myself I'd made the right choice. Harold was a good husband, a good provider. We had Dean, built a comfortable life together. But even on my happiest days, even when I was most grateful for what I had, there was always a small part of me that wondered what if. Now, 40 years later, Karim stood beside me at my son's wedding, offering $3 million to rescue me from the cruelest humiliation of my life. The room was still silent, everyone staring at this distinguished stranger who had just upended their cruel game. Dean found his voice first. "I'm sorry. Who are you exactly?" Karim smiled, but it wasn't warm. "I'm someone who recognizes the value of a truly exceptional woman when I see one." Fallon had recovered from her shock and was now staring at Karim with undisguised greed in her eyes. $3 million? You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious," Karim replied. "Though I suspect Mrs. Thornton is worth far more than any amount of money." He looked down at me then, and in his eyes I saw 40 years of love that had never dimmed, patience that had never wavered, and a question that was finally being asked again. The silence in the ballroom stretched like a wire about to snap. 300 wedding guests sat frozen, champagne glasses halfway to their lips, all eyes moving between Karim and the head table, where Fallon stood pale as her wedding dress. Dean looked like he'd been slapped, his mouth opening and closing without any sound coming out. $3 million, Karim repeated, his voice carrying easily across the room. "Cash, for the honor of ensuring Mrs. Thornton receives the care and respect she deserves." Fallon made a strangled sound, her hand gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles went white. Then, as if someone had cut her strings, she collapsed back into her chair, her eyes rolling back. The maid of honor rushed to fan her with a napkin while Dean stood there, still staring at Karim in complete bewilderment. "Mom," Dean said slowly, his voice cracking slightly. "Who is this man?" I looked up at Karim, this ghost from my past who had materialized at my darkest moment like something out of a dream. His hair was silver now instead of the thick black I remembered, and lines marked the corners of his eyes. But he was still the most handsome man I'd ever seen. More than that, he still looked at me the way Harold never had, like I was precious, irreplaceable. "This is Karim al-Rashid," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "He's an old friend who carries around $3 million? Dean's voice was getting higher, more panicked. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" Karim stepped forward slightly, his hand briefly touching my shoulder in a gesture of support that sent warmth through my entire body. "I'm someone who has watched the woman I care about be subjected to cruelty she doesn't deserve. Your little auction was amusing, but I'm afraid I'm not playing." The wedding planner appeared at Dean's elbow, clipboard clutched to her chest, clearly out of her depth. "Sir, perhaps we could discuss this privately." "No," Karim said firmly. "This humiliation was public. My response will be public as well." He turned to address the room, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to commanding attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've just witnessed something disgusting. A son treating his mother like a burden. A daughter-in-law encouraging cruelty for entertainment. I want you all to remember this moment." Fallon had recovered enough to sit up straight, though she still looked shaky. But I could see the wheels turning in her head, the way her eyes narrowed as she studied Karim's expensive suit, his confident bearing. She was calculating, trying to figure out how to turn this to her advantage. "Sir," she said, forcing a weak smile, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. This was just a harmless joke between family." "Harmless?" Karim's voice could have cut glass. "You turned this woman into a laughingstock at her own son's wedding. You encouraged people to bid on her like she was a piece of furniture at a garage sale. In what world is that harmless?" Dean was looking around the room now, finally noticing the shocked faces, the whispered conversations, the way some guests were already reaching for their phones. The spell of the cruel entertainment was broken, and reality was setting in. His wedding, which was supposed to be the happiest day of his life, had become a spectacle of family dysfunction. "Look, Mr. Al-Rashid, was it?" Dean stepped forward, trying to take control of the situation. "I appreciate your concern for my mother, but this is a family matter." "Family?" Karim laughed, but there was no humor in it. "A family protects each other. A family doesn't auction off their elderly members for sport. What I saw here tonight wasn't family, it was abuse." The word hit like a physical blow. Several guests gasped, and I saw Fallon's parents exchange horrified looks. They'd been laughing along with everyone else just minutes ago, but now they were beginning to understand what they'd participated in. "Now wait just a minute." Fallon's father stood up, his face red with embarrassment. "We didn't know this was going to happen." "Fallon, what were you thinking?" But Fallon wasn't listening to her father. She was staring at Karim with a different expression now. Not shock or embarrassment, but something calculating and hungry. "Mr. Al-Rashid, you seem like a successful man. Perhaps we could discuss this more privately? I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," I said, finding my voice at last. I stood up slowly, my legs still shaky, but my resolve growing stronger. "You humiliated me in front of all these people because you thought it would be funny, because you thought I was worthless." "Mom, please," Dean started, but I held up my hand. "No, Dean. You don't get to mom please me after what you just did. You bid $8 for your own mother. $8. My voice was getting stronger now, fueled by 40 years of putting other people's needs before my own. "Do you know what I sacrificed for you after your father died? Do you have any idea what I gave up so you could have everything you wanted?" The room was silent again, but this was a different kind of silence. This wasn't the hungry quiet of people waiting for entertainment. This was the uncomfortable hush of people witnessing something real and painful. "I worked 2 jobs so you could go to that private high school," I continued, my voice carrying across the room. "I sold my wedding ring to buy you that car for graduation. I took out a second mortgage on the house to pay for your college because I believed you were worth it. And tonight, in front of all these people, you told me I was worth $8. Dean's face was red now, sweat beading on his forehead. "Mom, it was just a joke. Fallon was just showing everyone who she really is," I said. "And so were you." Karim moved closer to me, his presence steady and reassuring. "Mabel," he said softly, "you don't have to explain yourself to people who don't value you." The way he said my name, with such tenderness and respect, broke something open inside me. Tears started falling then, not the bitter tears of humiliation I'd been holding back, but something else. Relief, maybe. Or recognition. "How do you two know each other?" Dean demanded, his voice getting more agitated. "And what's this about $3 million? Mom, are you involved with this man?" Before I could answer, Karim reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, handing it to Dean. "Karim Al-Rashid, CEO of Al-Rashid Medical International. Perhaps you've heard of us?" Dean's face went white as he read the card. Even I could see the recognition dawn in his eyes. Al-Rashid Medical was one of the largest medical equipment companies in the world. I'd seen their name in news articles about billion-dollar hospital contracts. "You're that Al-Rashid," Dean said weakly. "I am. And Mabel and I knew each other many years ago, before she married your father. I've never forgotten her, and I've never stopped caring about her well-being." Fallon was on her feet again, her earlier weakness apparently forgotten. She smoothed down her dress and fixed her hair, putting on what I recognized as her charming face. "Mr. Al-Rashid, how wonderful to meet you. I'm sure if we'd known who you were, you would have treated Mrs. Thornton with respect." Karim's voice was dangerously quiet. "Because she was connected to someone with money? That tells me everything I need to know about your character." The ballroom erupted in murmurs as guests began putting the pieces together. The mysterious billionaire, the rejected mother, the cruel joke that had backfired spectacularly. I could see people pulling out their phones, and I knew this would be all over social media within the hour. Dean looked around desperately, finally understanding that his wedding had become a disaster. Can everyone just calm down? Let's handle this privately." "No," I said, surprised by the strength in my own voice. "I've handled your disrespect privately for years, Dean. I've made excuses for you, covered for you, pretended your indifference didn't hurt me. But this? This was too much." I looked around the room at all the faces staring back at me. Some looked ashamed, others curious. A few seemed genuinely sympathetic. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care what any of them thought. "Karim," I said, turning to face the man who had just defended me when my own son wouldn't. "I think it's time we talked." Karim and I found refuge in a small side room off the main ballroom, away from the chaos and whispered conversations. My hands were still trembling as I sat down in one of the velvet chairs, the full weight of what had just happened beginning to sink in. Through the thin walls, I could hear the muffled sounds of damage control, Dean's voice, high and stressed, trying to explain to confused guests, Fallon's shrill protests, the general murmur of a party that had gone completely off the rails. "I can't believe you're here," I said, looking at Karim as he sat across from me. Up close, I could see the years on his face more clearly, but they'd been kind to him. He looked distinguished, successful, every inch the international businessman he'd apparently become. "I never stopped thinking about you, Mabel," he said simply, "even after all these years." "But how did you know about the wedding? How did you even find me?" He smiled, and for a moment I saw the young resident I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. "I've kept track of you over the years, not in a stalking way," he added quickly, seeing my expression. "But I have contacts, people who occasionally mentioned how you were doing. When I heard Harold had passed, I wanted to reach out, but I wasn't sure you'd want to hear from me." "You should have," I whispered. "Those first months after Harold died, I was so lonely. When I learned about Dean's wedding, I thought it might be a chance to see you again, to make sure you were happy. I never expected." His jaw tightened. "I never expected to watch you be humiliated by your own son." The door burst open suddenly, and Dean rushed in, his tuxedo jacket wrinkled and his hair disheveled. Behind him came Fallon, who had somehow managed to fix her makeup and looked every inch the beautiful bride again, though her eyes were calculating and cold. "Mom, we need to talk," Dean said, closing the door firmly behind them. "This is getting out of hand." "Out of hand?" I stood up, feeling stronger with Karim beside me. "What's out of hand is that you participated in your wife's cruel joke at my expense." "It wasn't cruel," Fallon interjected, her voice taking on that wheedling tone she used when she wanted something. "It was just harmless fun. Everyone was laughing. Everyone was laughing at me," I said sharply. "There's a difference." Dean ran his hands through his hair, leaving it even more disheveled. "Look, maybe it went too far, but you're overreacting. And now you've embarrassed us in front of all our friends and family." "I embarrassed you?" The words came out as almost a shout. "Dean, do you hear yourself? I'm not the one who turned my own mother into a punchline." Fallon stepped closer to Karim, her entire demeanor shifting. "Mr. Al-Rashid, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. If we'd known who you were, of course we would have treated Mabel differently. You have to understand, we're just a simple family." "Simple?" Karim's voice was ice cold. There was nothing simple about what I witnessed out there. That was calculated cruelty, designed to humiliate a woman who has clearly sacrificed everything for her family. "You don't know anything about our family," Dean said, his voice rising. "You don't know what she's like to live with, how demanding she can be." Demanding? I stared at my son in disbelief. When have I ever been demanding? When I paid for your college? When I helped with the down payment on your house? When I babysat your friends' kids so you could go out? When have I ever asked you for anything except basic respect? The silence that followed was deafening. Dean's face was red, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He couldn't answer because there was no answer. I had never been demanding. I had been convenient. Fallon, sensing that Dean was failing, tried a different approach. "Mabel, sweetheart, you have to understand how this looks. A strange man offering millions of dollars for you? People are going to talk. They're going to say awful things about our family." "Your family?" I turned on her, years of suppressed resentment finally boiling over. "Since when am I part of your family, Fallon? You've made it clear from day one that I'm an inconvenience. You seat me at the back of the room like a distant relative. You make jokes about my health. You roll your eyes every time I speak. Don't you dare pretend you care about my reputation now." "That's not true," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It is true," Dean said quietly, and we all turned to look at him in surprise. "It is true, and I let it happen." He sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "God, Mom, what have I done?" For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was when my son would finally see what he'd become, what he'd allowed to happen to our relationship. Maybe we could fix this. Then Fallon moved to stand behind Dean's chair, her hands on his shoulders, and I saw her grip tighten possessively. "Dean, don't let her manipulate you. She's just upset because her little plan backfired." "My plan?" I stared at her in amazement. "What plan?" "Bringing your rich boyfriend to the wedding to show us up. Did you think we wouldn't figure it out? Did you think we'd be impressed by his money?" Karim stood up slowly, and something in his movement made everyone else take a step back. "Mrs. Thornton," he said, his voice formal and deadly quiet. "I'm going to give you one chance to apologize to Mabel for what you just said." "I don't owe her anything," Fallon said, but I could hear the nervousness creeping into her voice. "Actually, you do." Karim pulled out his phone and scrolled through something quickly. "Dean, what company do you work for?" Dean looked confused by the sudden change of subject. "Henderson Medical Supply, why?" "And who do you think Henderson Medical Supply's biggest client is?" The color drained from Dean's face. No, that's not possible. Al-Rashid Medical International holds a 60% stake in Henderson Medical Supply," Karim said calmly. "We acquired it last year as part of our North American expansion, which means, technically, I'm your boss." Fallon's mouth fell open. Dean looked like he was going to be sick. "Of course," Karim continued, "I don't involve myself in day-to-day personnel decisions. I leave that to local management. But I do receive reports about employee performance, company culture, things like that." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Dean's career, the job that supported his lifestyle and his new wife's expensive tastes, was ultimately in the hands of the man he'd just watched his wife insult. "Sir, we didn't know," Dean stammered. "If we'd known who you were, you would have treated your mother with respect because you thought it might benefit you financially," Karim finished, "not because she deserved it, but because it might have been profitable. Do you understand how that sounds?" Dean's shoulders slumped. "It sounds awful. It is awful." Karim sat back down, his attention turning to me. "Mabel, I want you to understand something. I didn't come here tonight to cause trouble or to show off my wealth. I came because I hoped to see you again, to maybe have a quiet conversation and catch up on old times. But when I saw what they did to you," his hands clenched into fists, "I couldn't just sit there and watch. You defended me when my own son wouldn't," I said softly, "because you deserve to be defended. You deserve to be cherished and protected and loved. You always did." Fallon was staring at Karim with naked greed now, her earlier hostility completely forgotten. "Mr. Al-Rashid, Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot. I'd love to get to know you better. Maybe we could have dinner sometime. Just the four of us. No, Karim said simply. No, I have no interest in spending time with people who treat others cruelly for entertainment. And I certainly have no interest in any relationship with you. Fallon's face flushed red. You can't just dismiss me like that. I'm family. You're not my family, Karim said. And frankly, after tonight, I question whether you deserve to be Mabel's family either. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Dean looked up at his mother, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. Mom, he said quietly, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what happened out there. I don't know what came over me. I do, I said sadly. You forgot who I was. You forgot what I meant to you. And honestly, Dean, I'm not sure you can remember. Before anyone could respond, there was a knock at the door. The wedding planner's voice came through, urgent and stressed. Mrs. Thornton, the guests are asking questions. Some people are leaving. We need to know what to tell them. I looked around the room, at my son, who had betrayed me for a laugh, at my daughter-in-law, who had orchestrated my humiliation, at Karim, who had appeared like an answer to a prayer I hadn't even known I was praying. Tell them, I said clearly, that the mother of the groom has left the building. We left the wedding venue in Karim's Mercedes, the silence between us heavy but not uncomfortable. As the lights of the ballroom faded behind us, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: relief. For the first time in decades, I wasn't worried about what someone else needed from me, wasn't calculating how to make someone else happy at my own expense. Where would you like to go? Karim asked gently as we pulled out of the parking lot. I don't know, I admitted. I haven't thought past getting out of there. Coffee? A quiet place to talk? I nodded, and he drove us to a small cafe downtown that was still open despite the late hour. The few customers there were absorbed in their own conversations or laptops, giving us the privacy we needed. Karim ordered us both coffee, and we sat in a corner booth, the events of the evening settling between us like dust after an explosion. I keep expecting to feel guilty, I said, wrapping my hands around the warm mug, for walking out on Dean's wedding, for causing a scene. But I don't. I feel free. Good, Karim said firmly. You should never feel guilty for refusing to be someone's target. He's my son, I said, though the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. I raised him alone after Harold died. I thought I did a good job. You did do a good job. Dean's choices tonight don't reflect on your parenting, Mabel. They reflect on his character. I sipped my coffee, thinking about all the years I'd made excuses for Dean's behavior. The way he'd stopped calling regularly after he met Fallon. How he'd forgotten my birthday last year but remembered to ask for money for their vacation. The gradual distancing that I'd told myself was just natural as he built his own life. When did I become so invisible? I asked, more to myself than to Karim. You were never invisible to me, he said softly. Never. Even after all these years, you're still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. I looked up at him, this man who had loved me 40 years ago and somehow still saw value in me when my own family didn't. Karim, why didn't you ever marry? He was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. I tried once about 10 years after I returned to Saudi Arabia. My family arranged a marriage with a lovely woman from a good family. But on our wedding day, as I stood at the altar, all I could think about was you. It wasn't fair to her to marry her when my heart belonged to someone else. So you called it off? I called it off. My family was furious, but I couldn't live a lie. I threw myself into building the business instead, told myself that was enough. But it never was. The weight of his words settled over me. While I was building a life with Harold, raising Dean, playing the role of the perfect wife and mother, Karim had remained alone, carrying his love for me like a torch that never dimmed. I never forgot you either, I whispered. Even when I was happy with Harold, even when Dean was small and my life was full, there was always a part of me that wondered what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to go with you. And now? His dark eyes searched mine. What do you wonder now? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text message. Then another, and another. I glanced at the screen and saw Dean's name appearing over and over. Mom, please come back. We need to talk. The guests are asking questions. this is humiliating. Fallon is crying. You're ruining our wedding. How could you do this to us? I showed the messages to Karim, who read them with a deepening frown. Notice, he said, that not one of those messages contains an apology. He was right. Every message was about what I had done to them, how I had embarrassed them, how I needed to fix the situation I had supposedly created. Not one word acknowledging their part in what had happened. My phone rang then, Dean's name flashing on the screen. I almost declined the call, but something made me answer. Mom, thank God. Where are you? You need to come back right now. No, Dean, I don't. What do you mean, no? This is my wedding day. You can't just leave. I can, and I did. But people are talking. They're saying horrible things about our family. What people are saying about our family is true, I said calmly. You did humiliate your mother at your own wedding. Fallon did organize a cruel joke at my expense. And when someone defended me, you were more concerned about being embarrassed than about how your behavior made me feel. It was just a joke, Mom. God, you're being so dramatic. A joke is funny for everyone involved, Dean. What happened tonight was bullying. There was a pause. Then Fallon's voice came through the phone. She must have grabbed it from Dean. Mabel, this is ridiculous. You're acting like a child. Come back here right now and apologize to our guests. Apologize? I almost laughed. For what? For embarrassing us. For bringing that man and causing a scene. I didn't bring Karim to cause a scene. He defended me because you and Dean were treating me like garbage. Karim, is it? Fallon's voice turned sly. How convenient that your rich boyfriend showed up just when you needed him. How long have you been planning this little performance? Fallon, I said, my voice ice cold. You have exactly 1 minute to put my son back on the phone before I hang up and block both your numbers. You wouldn't dare. I hung up and immediately blocked both Dean's and Fallon's numbers. Then I turned my phone off completely and set it on the table. Feel better? Karim asked. Actually, yes. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of 40 years of separation and the trauma of the evening slowly giving way to something else. Possibility. Mabel, Karim said finally, I have something to ask you. And I want you to know that whatever your answer is, I'll respect it completely. I nodded, my heart beginning to race. Come with me, he said simply. Come to Dubai. Let me show you the life we could have had, the life we could still have. I have a beautiful home there, overlooking the Persian Gulf. We could travel together, see the world, spend whatever time we have left actually living instead of just surviving. The offer hung between us like a bridge I could either cross or turn away from. Karim, I'm 62 years old. I'm not the young woman you fell in love with. Neither am I the young man who loved you, he said with a smile. We're both older, hopefully wiser, certainly more aware of how precious time is. But my feelings for you haven't changed, Mabel. If anything, they've deepened over the years. What about Dean? What about him? After tonight, do you really think he's going to welcome you back with open arms? And even if he does, will it be because he genuinely wants you in his life? Or because he's afraid of what his association with me might mean for his career? I knew he was right. Dean's attempts to get me back to the wedding hadn't been about love or regret. They'd been about damage control, about preserving the image he wanted to project. I raised him alone for so many years, I said. I sacrificed so much. And he repaid that sacrifice by auctioning you off for $8, Karim said gently. Mabel, you've spent your entire adult life putting other people's needs before your own. When is it going to be your turn to be happy? My phone, even turned off, seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds on the table between us. In it were years of guilt trips, demands for money, expectations that I would always be available, always understanding, always sacrificing. But there were also pictures of Dean as a baby, memories of the good times we'd shared before Fallon came into the picture. I'm scared, I admitted. Of what? Of choosing wrong again, of giving up everything and then regretting it. Karim reached across the table and took my hands in his, the same gesture he'd made 40 years ago when he'd first asked me to come with him. The only thing you'll regret, Mabel, is wasting any more time on people who don't value you. I can't promise that choosing me will be easy, but I can promise that you'll never again have to wonder if you're loved. I looked into his eyes, those dark eyes that had haunted my dreams for 4 decades, and I saw my future. Not the safe, predictable life I'd always chosen, but something beautiful and uncertain and alive. How long do I have to decide? As long as you need. I'm not going anywhere this time. But even as he said it, I realized I already knew what my answer would be. The girl who had been too scared to take a chance 40 years ago was gone. In her place was a woman who had learned, too late, but not too late to matter, that some chances only come once in a lifetime. 3 weeks later, I stood in my kitchen, packing the last of my dishes into boxes. The house felt hollow and strange, filled with the echoes of a life I was about to leave behind. Every room held memories: Dean's first steps in the hallway, Harold reading the newspaper at the breakfast table, family dinners that seemed warm and loving until I realized I was the only one making the effort. Karim had returned to Dubai to make arrangements, but not before spending every day with me, helping me sort through 40 years of accumulated possessions and even more accumulated regrets. We'd talked for hours, filling in the gaps of our separate lives, and with each conversation, I felt more certain that I was making the right choice. The doorbell rang, interrupting my packing. Through the window, I saw Dean's car in the driveway, and my stomach tightened. I'd been expecting this visit, dreading it and anticipating it in equal measure. I opened the door to find Dean standing on my porch, looking tired and defeated. Behind him, Fallon sat in the car, her arms crossed, clearly furious about being dragged along. "Hello, Dean," I said quietly. "Mom." He looked past me at the boxes visible in the hallway. "So it's true. You're really leaving." "Yes, I am." "When?" "Tomorrow." His face crumpled slightly. "Mom, please, can we talk? I mean really talk, not like at the wedding. I know I messed up." "You humiliated me in front of 300 people," I said, not unkindly, but not softening the truth either. "You reduced my worth to $8 while everyone laughed. It was stupid. It was cruel. I know that now." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. "But you're my mother. You can't just leave." "Why not?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. Because you're my mother," he repeated, as if that explained everything. "And what does that mean to you, Dean? What does being your mother entitle me to?" He opened his mouth, then closed it, struggling to find an answer that wouldn't sound hollow. Finally, he said, "It means your family." "Family supports each other," I said. "Family doesn't mock each other for entertainment. Family doesn't treat each other like burdens." "I know. You're right. And I want to make it up to you." "How?" Again, silence. Because the truth was, Dean didn't know how to value me beyond what I could do for him. He'd never learned to see me as a person with my own needs and dreams and desires. "What about him?" Dean asked suddenly, gesturing toward the car as if Karim might materialize. "This guy you barely know?" "I've known Karim longer than I knew your father when I married him," I said. "And in 3 weeks, he's shown me more respect and consideration than I've received from you in years. He's using you, Mom. Rich men like that, they don't fall for women women your age. He wants something. Women like me?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean old? Worthless? Worth about $8? Dean flinched. "That's not what I meant." "It's exactly what you meant. And you're wrong, Dean. Karim loved me 40 years ago when I was young and beautiful, and he loves me now when I'm older and grayer. He sees value in me that you've never bothered to look for." From the car, Fallon honked the horn impatiently. Dean glanced back at her, then at me, and I saw him make his choice, just as he had at the wedding. He chose her over me. "Look, Mom, Fallon thinks maybe we could work something out. If you stay, we could have dinner once a month or something. You could babysit when we have kids. We could be a real family." "Once a month," I repeated. "How generous. What do you want from me?" Dean's voice rose, frustration overtaking whatever remorse he'd been trying to project. "You want me to beg? You want me to get on my knees?" "I want you to love me," I said simply. "Not need me, not use me, not tolerate me. Love me." "But you don't, do you, Dean? You never learned how." He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the truth in his eyes before he even spoke. I don't know how to do this without you. Do what? Life, marriage, being an adult. You've always been there to fix things, to pay for things, to make everything okay. And now you'll have to learn, I said gently. It'll be good for you. Fallon honked again, longer this time. Dean looked back at the car, then at me, clearly torn between prolonging this conversation and facing his wife's wrath. Go, I said. She's waiting. Mom? Go, Dean. Take care of yourself. Learn to be the man I raised you to be. He hesitated for another moment, then turned and walked back to the car. I watched them drive away, Fallon's animated gesturing visible through the passenger window, as she no doubt berated Dean for taking so long. I felt sad, but not surprised. Some people never change, and Dean had shown me exactly who he was. The next morning, Karim arrived to take me to the airport. He found me sitting in my empty living room, holding a framed photo of Dean's graduation from college. In the picture, Dean's arm was around my shoulders, both of us smiling at the camera. It had been taken just 5 years ago, but it felt like a lifetime. Having second thoughts? Karim asked gently, sitting beside me on the floor. No, I said, and I meant it. Just saying goodbye to who I used to be. And who was that? Someone who thought love meant sacrifice. Someone who believed that if I just gave enough, did enough, suffered enough, eventually I'd earn the love I wanted. I set the photo aside. I'm tired of earning love, Karim. I want to just receive it. You will, he promised. Every day for the rest of our lives. The flight to Dubai was long, but I didn't mind. For the first time in years, I had nowhere I needed to be. No one depending on me. No obligations weighing me down. I slept better on that plane than I had in my own bed in months. Dubai was everything Karim had promised and more. His home was a beautiful villa overlooking the Persian Gulf, with gardens that bloomed year-round and rooms filled with light and art. But more than the luxury, more than the beauty, I loved the peace. No phone calls demanding my attention, no guilt trips, no one treating me like an inconvenience. We were married 3 months later in a small ceremony in Karim's garden, with just a few close friends as witnesses. I wore a dress the color of sunset, and Karim couldn't stop smiling as we exchanged vows. When the imam pronounced us husband and wife, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. Dean didn't call on my wedding day. He didn't call on my birthday the following month. In fact, I didn't hear from him at all until 6 months later, when a mutual acquaintance mentioned that he and Fallon were having marital problems. Apparently, without me there to manage their finances, mediate their arguments, and provide emotional support, they'd discovered they didn't actually like each other very much. The acquaintance asked if I planned to reach out to Dean, maybe offer to help save his marriage. I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds before saying no. My life now was full in ways I'd never imagined possible. Karim and I traveled together, exploring places I'd only dreamed of seeing. We spent lazy mornings reading on our terrace, afternoons wandering through art galleries and markets, evenings cooking together in our beautiful kitchen. He treated me like I was precious, like my thoughts and opinions mattered, like my happiness was as important as his own. One evening, as we sat watching the sunset over the Gulf, Karim took my hand and said, "Do you ever regret it? Leaving your old life behind?" I thought about Dean, probably sitting in his empty house, finally understanding what he'd lost. I thought about Fallon, no doubt looking for her next target now that I was no longer available. I thought about all the years I'd wasted trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it. No, I said, meaning it completely. I regret not doing it sooner. The woman who had stood in that ballroom being auctioned off like a piece of furniture was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her worth, someone who had finally learned the difference between being needed and being loved. I was 62 years old when I finally started living my real life. Some people might say that's too late, that I'd wasted too many years, but I know better now. It's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to walk away from people who don't value you. And it's never too late for love, real love, The kind that sees you and cherishes you, and never makes you feel like you have to earn your place in someone's heart. Dean learned that lesson the hard way when he realized too late that he'd traded his mother's unconditional love for a wife who only loved what he could provide. But by then, I was already gone, living the life I'd always been meant to live, with the man who'd waited 40 years for his second chance. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's getting happy. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.